Hello. Hi. Hi, everybody. Okay. Hi, Captain Courageous, aka Mr. Charles. Right. So, welcome to Design Thinking, and it's exciting to know that you're using DT as an approach. So, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what are some of the things that you might want to bear in mind, as you go around or as you go about scoping for your data. Yeah. So I'll be using some terminology or some words that we use in design thinking. So if anybody's not sure of any of these words, you can proceed to ask um, Mr. Charles. Yeah. So the most important thing as you are trying to understand or get data from your friend, okay, for your assignment is you're looking for stories. Yeah, you're not just looking for answers, you're looking for stories. So this is why we call it scoping. You're scoping and you're also casting a net to go as far and wide. And there are certain things you have to understand that makes it different to a regular interviewing technique. Yeah. So uh, we want to try and get rich stories. And to do that, there are two layers. First, you have to touch the surface, and then from there you deep dive. Yeah, and I think Mr. Cha has already mentioned that when you're asking questions, you must remember to use open-ended questions. You should never offer opinions, suggestions, and never judge your interviewees. And even if you disagree. But the most important thing is because you are doing this, via Zoom, you should also look at the body language as well. Because if the body language of the person that you're interviewing is still a little bit rigid and whatnot, that means you're still at the surface level. So one of the ways that you know that the person is ready to deep dive or you're ready to issue deep dive questions is when the body language of the person that you're interviewing is a lot more relaxed. There's more eye contact and there's a lot more, the answers tend to get longer as well. And this is why you have to use questions that start with why. Why is that so? Tell me how. Can you walk me through? Can you explain a little bit more? These are the kind of open-ended questions that you must use. And in design thinking, even for why, we have this rule of 5. In other words, you should ask a person why at least 5 times to go beneath the surface. So, for example, if I'm asking Mr. Charles, so Charles, why is it that you enjoy photography compared to sketching? So Mr. Charles would probably give me an answer, but that wouldn't be enough. Then I will ask, why is that so? And then proceed by, could you help me understand better? Could you explain more? But why? Why? And why? So it's like talking to a little child. And if you notice children, they are very good at scoping. And that shows, how they really want to get to a particular level or depth of an answer. So this is one thing that you should bear in mind. So look at the body language, make sure that the person is already ready to go into the deep dive questions. Yeah. So deep dive questions is when you would expect or anticipate the answers from the interviewee to be a lot longer. And this is where you need to change the role a little bit and be more of an attentive listener. Sometimes when we are doing interviewing, we tend to be very easily restless. We try to cut in or we try to finish the sentence or we try to feed in information into our friends' answers, especially when they're our friends, we kind of know them or we think that we know we are able to anticipate. The thing is in design thinking, you can't do that. Yeah. And this is where pauses play an important role. So when you're asking a question and the person is having pauses, let it be. Pauses like this is actually useful because it is through the pauses that the person is getting ready to deep dive. So you should not push that person to hasten the answers. So a lot of this is very critical in how you develop empathy, because empathy is something that you cannot develop within minutes. So don't be surprised if your conversations can actually extend beyond 30 minutes before you actually get to something a little bit more substantial. You must remember the answers that you're looking for through their rich stories are things that you have not heard before. It is going to allow you to learn something new about your friend. So if it's going to be an answer that you probably imagine that your friend is going to tell you, then you've not done a good job in interviewing. In design thinking is all about going above and beyond, trying to bring back something new, something different, something original. Otherwise, you are not tapping into the heart of the problem at all. In fact, you might not even looking at the problem uh, head on correctly. You're probably looking from a different angle, or you're probably looking at it from a completely off tangent angle altogether. So you have to be very, very discerning how you are approaching the questions. Look at the body language, apply pauses, don't push, don't say anything about what you think, because what you think does not matter at all. And these are very important things to remember because you're interviewing friends compared to when you're interviewing strangers. So that's a bit of a challenge there. Yeah. Okay. And then some of the things that you should bear in mind when you begin your questions would be things like tell me about or tell me more. What kinds of people or what kind of things, what kind of activities, why do you think? And then if a person, if your friend gives you an idea of a situation, it's good to proceed by asking, tell me more. Now, it's not about whether you genuinely want to know or not. Yeah, and here's where you have to put your own personal biasness. Yeah, so you should always encourage your friends to keep talking. That means you have to keep digging. So tell me more, walk me through, tell me why. And it's also good to try a different approach. So why was it not working well? So why was it not something that made you excited? You can even be imaginative and say things like, if you had a magic wand and you could change the world in blah 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 blah, what would it be? So this is where you need to have a little bit of creativity even in the way you phrase your questions. So these are some of the things that separates design thinking conversations to a normal interview structure. Yeah. So far, does it make sense, Charles?
Yeah, I think. I
Charles,
think. Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Oh, sorry.
Charles!
I just unmuted.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was on mute.
Oh,
Yeah, so I
okay.
didn't want to interrupt you
All right.
earlier.
But
Uh,
so far, does it make sense?
yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it really does.
Okay.
Yeah, keep
All right.
going.
Okay, now I'm gonna go on to the next stage. So that was just conversation. So now, from the conversation, what do you do? So the answers that you have gotten from your friend is what we call data. So normally when you have data, here's what we normally do in design thinking. For every answer, it is recommended that you write them down on one fresh post-it note. So that means you should not write more than 1 point on a post-it. So you can imagine a wall full of post-its, but each post-it is representing one answer. And from there, you can visually have an idea on how many data you have collected. Bearing in mind that not all of those data will be useful, because once you have a data wall consisting of all the answers that we've already gathered from your interview, you will now need to divide them into themes. So what are they? So themes is when you look at what are the commonalities that these answers have. Yeah. So for example, you see that your friends have a, a, a a theme in, or these are some of the things that makes your friend not very happy. So you put it under one theme. Okay, these are some of the things that make your friend very excited. So that comes under another theme. But you must take a different color post-it to separate them according to themes. So now you already see your data point branching out into categories. Okay? And we have just started with the conversation build up. So that's the thing about design thinking. You have to be very patient. It's not about going straight to problem solving. It's about breaking down the process even further. But why? It's because we are constantly trying to look for something new. Remember, you may know your friend. You may think you know what to get your friend, but that's not for you to decide. The whole idea of this assignment is for you to deep dive into your friend's life story to see if there's something different, something new about your friend that you didn't know about, and that could bring something new to the dynamics or depth of your friendship. Okay? So the other thing is you might want to also look at your data, okay, and look at the quality of your answers. For example, if some of those answers are like yes, no, that means those are low quality answers. You don't need them. So you set them aside. Because what you want at the end of the day, you want a data wall that consists only of high quality data, because high quality data is equivalent to high quality processing that will lead you to high quality ideation later on. Okay? So avoid general questions. So one way to know if your questions were not good is by looking at the quality of the answer. So if the questions does not yield any substance, you put it aside. Now, in design thinking, you do not throw any of those post-its away. But what you do is you create another section on the wall, okay, where you put the least effective questions there. Why? Because sometimes in the future, when you are going to another phase, you might want to revisit. You might want to backtrack. You might want to go back to the beginning of the process, which is another unique facet about design thinking. You have a process, but every stage is so valuable to the other, and you can revisit just as much as we can continue to reiterate over and over again. Okay? Now, look at the answers. Now, the answers that you're looking for are those that actually craft out stories, meaning the answers are telling you something new, something different, something extraordinary about your friend. That is how you know you are crafting out not just good questions, but good answers. And those are the ones you can separate onto another side of your data wall. Okay? Now, it's always okay to start with broad questions, okay, and then you narrow down. Meaning, if you look at your data wall and you feel that the answers are not good enough, that means you've not done sufficient questioning. You'll have to go back and carry on the conversation. All right. So what it means is that there is no one stage for conversations. You might have to go back and do another session, or you might want to prolong the conversation. But the same principle applies. You must surface, then deep dive, look at the body language, and make sure that you are asking the right questions. And how you know that is by the length of the answers and by the substance that's coming out in those answers. Okay. The other thing you want to bear in mind is if you feel that your interviewee is not comfortable, not in a good mood, does not seem to be in the mood to engage in a conversation, that's also something you might want to bear in mind. Stop. You might want to issue a conversation another time. Because you must remember, developing empathy is very, very critical in human connection. So even if it means you have an assignment to do, but the interview is not in the mood, you can't engage empathy. So you got to step back. All right. So design thinking, you must remember, design thinking is about understanding users' perspective. And that user is not you. It's the person that you are engaging with. Okay. So that is why empathy, to develop empathy, is so critical in the discovery phase, because you're still scoping, you're still casting the net as far and wide as possible. Okay, and if you don't do this if you don't do this step effectively, then the subsequent steps will already be compromised as well. Okay, now build rapport with your interviewee. Very important, especially if you think you are close to your friends. You cannot jump the gun and make assumptions for your friend. The other one is, if the friend that you're interviewing is not a familiar person, then you need to spend a little bit more time to develop a rapport to make that person feel comfortable. Here's an example of what are the things that you should avoid. Say I'm having a conversation with Mr. Charles, and Mr. Charles is telling me about his hobby in taking pictures. He loves photography. So here I am asking Charles a couple of questions. So Charles, tell me about what you did over the weekend. So Mr. Charles tells me, oh, I took photographs. And I'll be like, oh, really? What kind of photographs? And Mr. Charles says, oh, I took pictures of, my neighborhood, my dogs and all that. And I'm like, oh my God, is that it? That sounds so boring. Is there anything else that you can do? And then Mr. Charles go on to explain, oh, well, I took pictures of my family, and then I took pictures of my kids and what they were doing, because I was thinking, it'd be interesting to do a journal to document what everybody did during MCO. So that I can put in a time capsule, and then, and then later on in the future, or when they have kids of their own, they can take it out and we can all laugh at it. And I'd be like, well, this sounds like something I wouldn't do. I'm sure it could be something a lot more exciting to do. Maybe you guys should go on and, do something a bit more physical, So what's wrong about that? First of all, I'm imposing all my judgment on Mr. Charles. I'm even navigating him on what to do, how to even think, and how to feel. Absolutely unacceptable in design thinking. But there was one aspect that was pretty useful. Okay, and I will expand on that one. There was one part where I mentioned about he could document this and then put in a time capsule, and then that could be something interesting in the future for his children's children. Sounds like a great idea, right? Wrong, because that idea came from me. Once again, I'm imposing it down on Charles, who's my interviewee. So what sounds like a great idea can still be a bad strategy in design thinking when you're having a conversation. And this is what's probably going to happen when you have that conversation with your friends. So this is what should be happening. So here I am conversing with Mr. Charles once again about his interest in photography. So Charles, you took pictures over the weekend. Oh, great. So tell me a little bit more about it. What kind of pictures did you take? Why did you take those pictures? Could you tell me a little bit more about your fascination with photography? So out of all the pictures that you took, what are the 3 top pictures or the 3 best ones? Could you walk me through each one and why you think they're really fascinating? What did you like about them the most? How long have you been doing photography? If it weren't photography, what else would you be doing? What inspires you to take these pictures? What caught your eye? So if you notice, these questions are very open-ended. At the same time, it allows Mr. Charles to have time and depth to also deep dive within and explore. And not only is he able to talk about something he's passionate about, but he can go on and on and on and on and on about it. And that's what we want to achieve through the conversation at this scoping phase, which is why we call it discovery. You're trying to discover. So the point is, in order to allow a person to deep dive, you got to ask open-ended questions where they can go on and on and on and on and on. And as the person is explaining, you take down notes, okay? And that's how you develop a comprehensive data, which will contribute to your data wall. So a short conversation can yield a huge data wall with so many post-its, but the whole idea is to allow your interviewee the opportunity to just talk and talk and talk and talk, because it takes fundamentally 5 whys for a person to start sharing. But it takes a lot more than just 5 whys for a person to really dig into what he ought to be sharing. So you are now torn between what he is sharing or what he needs to share and what he ought to share. So that is why in design thinking you have to be very, very patient. So patience is a fundamental aspect to developing empathy, because just like you are observing your interviewee's body language, the other person is also observing your body language, and he feels that he's being rushed, if he feels that he's being judged, that's it. You're not going to get anything out of this whole conversation. Which is why in design thinking, we try to not use the word interview, because the word interview connotes intimidation. We use the word conversation, right? So remember, as you're asking these questions, you're not supposed to lead them. Remember, you're not being a journalist. Being a journalist, when you ask questions, you corner them. You already have an intention. All right. Remember, although you are given an assignment to figure out what to give your friend as a gift, but the whole idea is to just imagine your friend is a blank slate. Your friend is an alien from outer space, and you're trying to get to know this person for the very first time with the imagination and wonderment of a 3-year-old. And I think that's the simplest way to put it in a nutshell on what you need to do in order to gain sympathy.
Empathy.
Empathy. Okay, to gauge empathy. Okay, and then remember, be patient, maintain eye contact, smile. Okay, you speak less, listen more. So once you have completed the conversation, and assuming that you have a data wall filled with potentially useful data, don't forget to categorize them according to themes, right? So once again, the themes would be, what are the running similarities that these answers have? At the same time, separate the less useful or least substantial answers you think and put it to one side. I said you think because, like I said earlier on, you can and you may want to revisit those points later on. Okay? But one more time, a tip would be, in design thinking, one post-it is equivalent to 1 point. Never put more than 1 point per post-it. Okay? Right. So whenever you conduct a conversation in design thinking, it is sort of like hand in glove. You should have a user profile. You need to create one. And the user profile is another framework. Yeah, so it's another useful tool that you can use, and you can use it in any setting, in any kind of context, right? But what a user profile does is it compartmentalizes crucial points of your interviewee. And so from one visual glance, you're able to sort of like capture the essence of your user. Now, this is very important if you are interviewing many people. So it doesn't matter how many, but usually every person that you interview warrants one user profile. So let's just say that you interview your friend. So all the information should go into a user profile. I've already provided with Mr. Charles a sample of a user profile framework. Yeah. So the framework is very, very comprehensive. First, it has the name, age, okay? It has the basic bio details about your friend. And then it has a category where you should summarize in a few words what type of friend, what type of person your friend is. And then there's another box in the user profile where you should identify what are some of the outstanding quotes or what are some of the outstanding things that your friend said. Okay, now this is where you have to be very discerning. Your friend may have said a lot of things, but this is where you need to look for what are the outstanding things that he or she said, and you put them into one of these boxes. Okay, and then in another box in the user profile is where you list down the actions and behavior. That means during the interview, during the conversation, what were some of the things that you noticed about your friend? For example, maybe when she talked about a particular topic, her eyes goes big, and that's how you know, oh, this person's getting very excited. Okay, or maybe the body language becomes a little bit stiff or rigid when he talks about a particular person or a particular gift or a particular experience. Yeah, all of these things are very, very important. I personally like to think about interviewing criminals. When you watch Criminal Minds, when you talk about criminals and how FBI agents do criminal profiling, and how a criminal profile is so specific and succinct, but it is comprehensive enough for them to sort of like have an idea on what kind of perpetrator to go out after. Sorry. So this is the same thing with your user profile. So each box sort of like compartmentalizes what is essential about the person that you interview. Another one would be thoughts and belief. Now, the difference between quotes and thoughts and belief is that the quote is what was uttered by your friend, but thoughts and belief are some of the things that he finds as a form of concepts or his fundamental idea or his outlook towards life. And you can only be able to answer this if you do deep dive questions. So that is why doing the user profile is very useful, because as you answer every box in the user profile, you will be able to see, oh, okay, I don't have anything in this box, which means you didn't ask enough questions to fill in the content for this. Okay, and the user profile would require you to deep dive sufficiently. So there's one for thoughts and belief, and there's another box on feelings and emotions. Now, it is not just feelings and emotions that you observe coming from your friend, but also the feelings and emotions that was coming out from your friend as he or she described certain things. So this is where you have to pay very close attention in that conversation. All right. One of the good things about design thinking when you're doing conversations is that you learn to be a better conversationalist, a better listener, and you learn to be sharper at identifying points, quality points. It is a very useful skill to polish. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about design thinking. All right, and then another box is what motivates them in life. Now, this is a very important box for you for this assignment, because what motivates them would put you on the right path towards what would be ideal later on to ideate as probable gifts for them. All right, there's another box, okay, equally useful, what demotivates them. So once again, to answer these two boxes, you need to fully deep dive into their life stories, okay? And it shouldn't be surface answers like, oh, what demotivates me? Okay, it's when I can't go out for MCO. But what would be better would be, what are the kind of emotions he feels being trapped during MCO, for example? What kind of emotions? For example, I can say I was frustrated, but frustration is a very general concept. But maybe it'd be better to be more specific. Yeah, I feel frustrated because, or I feel like this, or I feel like that. So those are the kind of substantial answers that should go into these boxes for your user profile. So once again, the importance of having the user profile after having done the conversation is that it acts as a barometer to the quality of your data. Because if you have very little to fill in these boxes in your user profile, that means you got to go back to your conversation. But before you go back and have or redo a conversation, you might want to go back to the data wall where you put aside some of the what you thought was least useful answers. Sometimes this is a time where you want to go back, revisit, maybe something was overlooked or underlooked there. So that is why, like I said earlier on, don't throw any post-its. Every point, everything that was uttered by your interviewee is very, very useful. Okay? So you will need to revisit those post-its when you're doing the user profile. So once again, to recap, build a conversation, and from the conversations, have a data wall. And from the data wall, look at the themes. Separate the substantial answers, the least substantial answers, put them into themes, and then from the data wall that you have already categorized, move on to the user profile and try and fill in all the answers. Now, when just one very important reminder for the box that talks about quotes, you want to write down verbatim how your friend said how your friend mentioned. Why? Because the last thing you want is to put it into your own words, because when you put it into your own words, you're already reframing it according to your perspective, which defeats the entire purpose of design thinking.
Mm.
Remember, design thinking is about user experience and you're not the user. All right. And then the other one would be defining words. So what it means here would be keywords. So codes and defining words have to be the words that came out from your friend's mouth, not from your mind and not from your frame, the framing of your thoughts. This has got nothing to do with you. I cannot stop emphasizing this because
Mm.
being human, that is what we do on a daily basis. We simplify things and we tend to summarize things so that we can move on with our daily activities. Design
Mm.
thinking is where you take a step back. You are just a medium. All right? It's about the user.